I know many of you will argue against me on this, but at times, like we're going through at the moment, a bit of gravitas at the top goes a long way. As you can guess from my grey hair, I've lived through a few recessions and experienced untold ups and downs. That's why I feel comfortable sharing that experience with clients. But I also like talking and discussing with like-minded people who themselves are focused on helping business prosper through using their own gravitas. So I jumped at the chance to welcome my guest today on Meet the Leader. He has a 30-year track record of success in business. He knows a lot about scale enhancing systems. He has a new book out called The Leader Launchpad. He's the founder and CEO of the Activate Group. Welcome, Howard Shaw.
Malcolm, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to see you. Just that you'll be slightly warmer than us in Northern England because you're in Miami. Howard, the bio I got said you specialize in liberating C-suite teams or boards or senior management, as we may say in the UK, from the barriers that hold them back. What do you mean? What do you find are the most common barriers, both professionally and personally? Are they real barriers or just perceived barriers?
Oh, there are real barriers, but usually our barriers are ourselves. If you look at most leaders, particularly in the small and middle market sized businesses, what they'll tell you is that they're carrying most of the load, that the only reason many of them have been successful was just like as I've been growing through my entrepreneurial career, the reason we get to where we are is because we just work 3 times harder than everybody else. But to me, the exceptional leaders are the ones that actually work less than everybody else and work on everybody else and learn how to switch where all the energy and all the effort is now coming from the people that work with them and for them rather than from them.
Do you feel then, just take that a bit further, that those people who started off, with a bag of tools and a couple of $100, that they haven't then transferred into the barrier of being a businessman? They are still a craftsman, for example.
In general, I would say correct. And so here, some dirty little secrets. I mean, when you look at it over time, when we first start a company, first of all, that takes significant ego. All right. It takes significant courage just to get going, get it going. But what happens over time is you have to cross a chasm. You say yes to everything when you first start, but when you start breaking through that chasm, so you've got some foundation in place and now you want to scale, now you have to say no probably 20 times more than you say yes, and that ego that got you there will probably prevent you from getting to where you want to go.
Oop, you just hit me right in my heart spot there. I said in my opening piece that we may appear to be in uncharted waters at present, but I'm not certain that's totally true. It may just be that we're experiencing another of those constant changes. How important do you think your experience in gravitas is in helping leaders through these times?
Well, let's be honest here. So we are all in the same storm, but different boats. So what I mean by that is, I see companies kind of fall into 5 different buckets, and it's you're either resuming right now, or you're rocketing right now, which for some people would seem like crazy. You might be regressing right now, rebuilding, or some unfortunately are restarting. So depending on which of those 5 boats you're in, this is a different dialogue. But at the end of the day, this dialogue is not very much different. All you threw was COVID in there. And so, yes, that was momentous. And for certain industries, it's almost diabolical. but let's be clear here. Throughout time, throughout every year we've ever been in business, have one business owner tell you that they weren't surprised that year and they're full of it. All right. So there's always something or some things every single year we didn't know, or we couldn't have known what's going to happen. So this is business. This is the world. This is what we live in. So the same skill sets that got us through all those same years, those other years, are the same ones that should take us through this one.
Mm. I love the title of your new book, The Leader Launchpad, because to me it looks like many businesses are on takeoff to a new mission, new destiny, new purpose, and need new thinking leaders to pilot it there. How important it is to have the moment, the right mindset to achieving this, and where does the right mindset come from?
So it's interesting, and I spent probably a lot of the beginning of the book setting everybody up on what are the mindsets you have to have in order to implement what's in that book, and to implement what in that book is what gets you to finally take off. And so the first one is I'm going to pick on ego. All right. So humility is one of the most important values a leader can have. And so there's a fine line. Let's be honest, for those of us that have been CEOs, you have to have a certain amount of ego just to step in that seat and have the courage to go. But you have to have enough humility to know that there's a lot more things you don't know than the things you do know. I'll never forget when way back when I'm a CPA, I took the CPA exam and I passed it the first time. In the United States, to pass all 4 parts, way back when it was 4 parts, only 10% of the people passed it. And even though I passed it the first time, I felt fortunate. They just asked questions that I happen to know
Yeah.
in the body of the universe. But if you looked at the expanse of the universe, I didn't know all of that. I just happened to know the slices that they asked me. I was prepared, right? And I got lucky. We have to realize that as leaders, all right? If we're going to take off, we have to realize that the true way in which we're going to be successful is to tap into everybody else around us, our employees, our vendors, our mentors, our network. And you won't do that if you don't have humility. You won't be able to see the wall that's right in front of you until you run into it, unless you have humility. So I'm going to say humility is going to be one of those important things that will get you through today and really help you catapult. Another one is playing to win. So what's interesting about that is those of us who have played on, and I've coached basketball, younger kids, and one of the things I saw in the difference between some of the teams that I put together was when you had all the players all in, and all they can think about is, being number one, being first, being the best. You got a different outcome than if a lot of leaders have this mindset of, oh, I'm just going to shoot for average. Average sucks.
Yeah.
And that's not going to get you there. So that desire to be the best, to be first, to be the largest, and all of that will catapult you. And it doesn't mean companies can't do okay, but the problem is you're competing against people that winning is everything. And
Mm.
if they're playing to win and you're just playing not to lose, you're going to get crushed. And so I definitely say playing to win is another one of those mindsets that are important. The other thing is you have to realize you have to have a balanced mindset. So one of the things that I discussed in the book was the difference. You have growth-oriented leaders, and then you have product-oriented leaders. So those are two examples of mindsets. And so if I'm growth-oriented and that's my leaning, then I may be really, really good at growing the top line and getting customers in, but then I serve them horribly because I don't think about the infrastructure that it takes to deliver all that growth. And then the product-oriented leaders, they're so focused on the perfect product, the perfect service, that what happens is they underestimate the importance of also that growth orientation, that thought process. They start giving away on price. They start putting on bells and whistles that no one's willing to pay for, but they feel pride in it, so they add it. So they do a lot of silly stuff when you're over leaning. So what you want to be is you want to be balanced, right? You almost want to be waste oriented. So what I mean by waste oriented is they're waste in both sides, being too product and service focused or being too growth oriented. And if you can have a balanced mindset of how you look at that, you'll find all the waste in your system and you'll actually grow faster and more profitably.
Mm. So you're saying recommended a hybrid between growth and product.
Correct.
Okay. Give me an outline of the 5-step actionable plan you provide for leaders in your book. Is that plan suitable for everyone, or does it have to be a particular type of leader who will make it work?
So that is they're the 5 crucial steps, regardless of your business, you need to consider. And the only exception I'm going to say is, so we have this gig economy now. If you are a solopreneur, there are elements of this book, such as the human capital management, where you're dealing with your people. You're not worrying about that as much. You have some vendors, some independent contractors maybe, but you're it. So there are definitely some facets in our book that don't work for the solopreneur. But if you're not a solopreneur, then you have to look at all 5. And one of the things that that got me, inspired me to do the book, was that when I looked at even some of the Goliath companies, they were usually only good at maybe 3, but most businesses were only good at 1 or 2 of the areas. And you really needed all 5 to succeed. So those 5 things are strategy, human capital management, planning, accountability, and stewardship.
Excellent. Okay. And you'll have to read the book, people, buy the book, people, to find out a little bit more about them. But the URL's behind me. Every leader wants success and wants it fast. And that's often before he or she is replaced in their job. Given today's unknown and changing challenges, how easy or not is it to develop a strategy that can lead to that faster growth and higher profitability?
All right, so let's set this up a little bit. So first of all, 80% of the businesses that we've interacted with, and I've met thousands of leaders, don't have a strategy. They have a product and a service, and they don't have a strategy. And then of the 20% that do have one, probably only 20% of those actually have a good strategy. So let's define strategy for a second. So strategy is when I choose a different set of activities so that I can compete on a different playing field than everybody else in the market. So when we are just trying to do what everybody else is doing, better, faster, and cheaper, that's operational effectiveness. That's not strategy. Strategy is figuring out where is that white space, that space in the market that's underserved. And then we are going to choose a different set of activities to serve that underserved market better than everybody else. And so my challenge to most of the people listening to this is you probably don't have a solid strategy, and so you're going to struggle now. Now, to the issue of speed, is even developing a strategy, a really good one, a solid one that is not just based on gut, requires market intelligence and some other things that most businesses don't do. And in our experience, most of the time it takes at least a year at least to figure out what is a solid strategy. Now let's talk about speed. All right, so speed is not as good as acceleration. Right? So we think about speed as how fast we go, but acceleration is when we make it move faster. But what you want to do is you want to increase velocity. And so to do that, this is where strategy comes in. But if you look at some of the Goliaths out there, whether it's Starbucks or Apple, they didn't hit and they didn't become the Goliaths or start that trajectory until year 25. Wow. All right. That was another thing, by the way, that inspired me. If you look at the history, all the pivot points in all of these companies were around 25 years, and it wasn't in Starbucks. Howard Schultz didn't even take off until his 25th year when he got his first coach. They were doing good. They were moving along, but neither Apple or Starbucks took off until the 25th year. So our job as leaders is now to try to think about how to accelerate and shorten that cycle time. That's why I wrote the book. But the reality is you have to have in your mind what is a realistic timeline to become a Goliath, to take off. And most companies sell too early. They give up too early. They're like close to the finish line, but it was so hard to get there that they didn't realize that this is what it takes to get velocity.
Persistence. Howard, I suggest that one of the biggest challenges companies will have as this pandemic continues and after it is that they will have sacrificed talent, perhaps in the wrong places, whilst making short-term staffing decisions. Now, that could leave them with the wrong people sitting in the wrong seats on the bus. What's your advice to, first of all, avoiding this mistake, and secondly, correcting it if they've made it?
So forget about this time. This has been an ongoing challenge in every business that you can be exposed to. Do we have the right? The first question every business owner even needs to ask. And remember, I gave you those 5 different places you want to be. You may be restarting, you may be rebuilding, you may be taking off. So you got to look at your stage. And the question you've got to ask is, what are the right seats that I need right now, given my state? And then as you're growing, those seats need to change, those roles need to change, they need to expand as you're at different stages in your business. Then the next question is, after I know which are the right seats, then I have to ask myself, what does success look like in those seats? Why would I hire anybody for them, and what would I expect? By doing that, you can then start figuring out who is the right who.
Yeah.
For those seats. And then you're gonna, if you're in the troubled times right now, you're gonna take some risks in a few seats that you know are not mission critical right now. And then as you're scaling, you're then gonna say, all right, I need to fill some of those in, because I was rolling the dice, and a few people were wearing too many hats, but they really were not qualified for what we need in those other areas. So, depending on where you're at right now, the first thing that I would ask myself is, what are the seats that I need today? And then do not cut on getting the right people in those seats, because one of the things we've learned as leaders is first who, then what. If I have the wrong who's, my what will never happen. And I see too often leaders, particularly now where they're so cost conscious, that they're hiring the wrong people because they want to pay less payroll. But you got to look at payroll as a multiplier. So every dollar I spend in payroll, I should multiply 2 to 3 times that at least in gross margin. So if I hire the wrong person, that 2 to 3 times may become half, and I might even not make money on my investment, or only 1 time. But when you hire the right person, then you get 2 to 3 times the performance out of that right person than the wrong person or the average person. So it's very, very important that, right now we've got this great opportunity. All right, you go back 6, 9 months ago, at least here in the US, unemployment was super low. So the biggest complaint we heard is we have trouble even getting good candidates in the door. Well, folks, that's gone. All right.
Yeah.
There are certain positions, in technology and all that may be a little bit more difficult, but in general, this is a time to go out there and start farming. Start looking for that great talent, because they're there, and then don't cut short. So a couple, actually it was last year, we had a client, and they had to stop growing. And we came down to, it was because they didn't fill 2 leadership positions, and it took them a whole year to fill those positions. And when I asked them, why is it taking you a year to fill these mission critical positions that's costing you business? They said, well, early on we found some great candidates, but they wanted to get paid $25,000 more in each of the positions than we thought we should pay. I said, all right, let's step back for a second. How much has it cost you not to fill the position? And when we figured it out, it cost them $1.5 million in gross margin. That would have went to their bottom line had they filled these 2 positions. So I would ask everybody that's listening to this, would you spend $50,000 to make $1.5 million? The answer should be yes. And then your challenge then is thinking about, what is the output we need from each role? What can we expect when we hire the right thing and demand the right thing? And when you have that level of clarity, then this right people, right seats, doing the right things becomes much easier.
Yeah. Now, for those viewers who are still thinking about spending the $50,000, you can come back and watch that later on. Let's move on to the next question with Howard. Let's go back to your book, The Leader Launchpad. You talk about building a culture of accountability. What do you mean by that? I understand, stand up, own up, and be counted. But is not accountability these days going into what we call here at BizVision the conscious business, being accountable for the actions of the business in, say, climate, mindfulness, modern day slavery in the supply chain, and so on?
So this works against bureaucracy, and this works against authoritative leadership. So those of you who believe in a lot of bureaucracy or have a lot of it, you're already destroying this. And those of you who are authoritative leaders are also destroying this. You see, we are no longer in economies where the work that people are doing is very fine-tuned and detailed. You have computers to do that today. You have robots to do that kind of work today. So the work that you have right now, that even in your very front lines at your lowest level, require people skills. They require people to think on their feet. You can't script everything that they're going to have. What you have to do is you have to create an environment. And so I look at business as an ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, I need strategy. In that ecosystem, I need an execution plan. In that ecosystem, I need to get the right people in the right seats doing the right thing. In that ecosystem, I need team cohesiveness. In that ecosystem, though, I need a culture. And so accountability is a culture, and accountability is process oriented. So what I mean by a culture is if you join any one of the organizations I've ever owned or own, all right, I expect you to think. I expect you, I'm going to give you some guide rails and say, listen, I'm hiring you and these are the outputs I expect, whether it's customer satisfaction, whether it's service levels, whatever it is, I'm going to make that crystal clear. And I'm going to say, now you own that. I'm not going to give you every single detailed step on how to do that. I can't and I won't. This is what you need to do. Then we provide training and all of that. And we expect them to do that. Now, on the flip side, that's an example of how your culture needs to be. You need to create an expectation. You own it. I don't. You own it first and always ask, how can I? Now, that's culture. Now you need processes to help pave the way. So part of my process is clearly defining what I expect from a role. And it's funny, I sat with 12 leaders yesterday and we were going through this. And then I asked everybody in the room, for every position that you have, is it clear exactly the mission of the role? And is it clear the indicators, the key performance indicators that tells somebody they had a good day, a good week, or a good month? And everybody did this.
Yeah.
They say, we have a few people like in our sales, it's crystal clear, but the rest of their 175 plus employees really don't have any KPIs. So what are they? So now you're going to ask them to be accountable, but accountable to what? You haven't made it clear for them. So we have to make clear expectations of what needs to happen. We also, as an organization, need to help them prioritize, because otherwise everybody's plates are too much. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use several tools in the toolkit to help you create a culture and an environment that fosters accountability. So the first one is making it clear, what's expected. The second thing is putting measures out there so that everybody can see it, some metrics. And then we actually use meetings when you're using them properly. And by the way, most of you hate meetings. And your problem is it's not that you're having too many meetings, you're having too many bad meetings. In those meetings, you should be talking with the people that are in the meetings about where we're at with regards to what we expected when we started and keeping everybody focused and aligned. And then another critical point is when somebody is off course, not living our core values, not achieving those metrics, not doing what we need for the customer, you need a feedback mechanism that's very rapid and apparent to those people. So by having the scorecard, they can look up at the scoreboard and say, oh my goodness, we're not winning. They can look up the scoreboard and say, well, we're winning, but I'm not doing my job. They can, so we got to make all this stuff clear. So the three components are going to be, what are the goals and priorities? What are the metrics that's going to say it? What are the meetings that are going to keep everybody on track? And then the one-on-one ones when they get off track.
Excellent, excellent. Now, just before we move to the last question, all viewers, please remember the URL behind me for Howard to be able to access his and buy his books. Brilliant, brilliant so far, Howard. Final question. I like to give all my guests 3 wishes. If I was to ask you to give your 3 wishes for the actions leaders should be doing now for the profitable future of the business, what would those 3 wishes be?
So I would wish, and as I said earlier, operational effectiveness is necessary. and you're going to continue to do that, I would wish for every one of you to have a real strategy. That would be wish number one. Wish number two I want to challenge you to figure out how to unlock the untapped potential of all the people that work for you and with you. And then the third wish I would have for you is for you to enjoy the journey. Business is supposed to be fun. Leadership is supposed to be fun. And if we take ourselves too seriously, this sucks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. We'll meet for a beer on that. Howard Shaw, I have loved, adored listening to you. You have tremendous energy, but you have some tremendous ideas. Thanks for the interview.
Thank you so much.